Financing project could involve different ways and means. A company could decide to finance a project on its own using its own resources, past earnings, or external resources, debt, equity. But ultimately, when a corporate does such a thing, it will do it on its own resources and its own balance sheet, meaning that debt holders could potentially have a recourse on the whole asset base of the company to get their money back if there is a problem during the operation of the project. A corporate could also decide to finance projects outside of the scope of its balance sheet, splitting roles and responsibilities between different partners. It would usually do that whenever the scope, the size, or the magnitude of the project is too large to be supported only by its own balance sheet. In this instance, project financing technique will be used, and it will consist in building outside the balance sheet of the company a financial structure where lenders have recourse primarily to the revenue stream of the project or assets they are financing, rather than to the balance sheet of the corporate sponsoring it. The key aspect of this structure is that the lenders have very limited to no recourse to the balance sheet and revenues of the sponsors. In fact, the lenders would hence have a recourse only on the amount of equity injected by the sponsors in the project. If problem occurs, construction overruns, delays, operating cash shortfalls, the lenders will not have a contractual rights to call for more equity. This is why project finance is often called limited recourse or non-recourse financing. The fact is, in project financing, the sponsors will team up with partners to set a specific venture in the form of an incorporated company, in which each of them will inject a share of equity that will ultimately represent its share of risk in the project. Once done, lenders could theoretically not call them for more than their share in equity in the project. This implies that risks are shared and distributed among the partners according to their ability and willingness to accept them. This further means that this risk allocation procedures depends upon each risk appetite. As a result, in project finance, we say that each party ultimately assumes risk that they are the best place to assess and support. However, it is not always the case that risk allocation is done in an efficient manner. When it is not done, lenders may have recourses that goes well beyond the equity injected by the sponsors into the company in charge of developing the project. Project company will be owned by the sponsors, who are the partners deciding to team up to design, build, finance, and operate the project at the first place. The equity will usually represent a small chunk of the whole financing. The remainder, 80%, even sometimes more than that, will be brought by the banks to fund the construction of the project. The project company will be structured as a limited liability company, precisely to avoid unlimited recourse by the banks on the balance sheet of the sponsors. We often call the company Special Purpose Vehicle, or SPV. In any event, project financing implies monopolies or quasi-monopolistic situation, and the SPV is granted by the government or one of its bodies an exclusive right to operate the assets in the form of concession agreement, license, of production sharings. And it's often for a long time, 20, 25 years or more. Assets could be an oil field, a gas pipeline, a toll road, a toll bridge, an airport, an hospital. Ultimately, rights and obligations of the SPV and those of the government will be laid down in the agreement linking them. We call this agreement the concession agreement or head contract. Right to levy a toll or a user fee and right to operate on a monopolistic situation as a counterweight, and the regulator is always there to oversight the implementation of the agreement. Regulators' role is to ensure no abuse exists as a result of the monopoly, and that provision of services to the population is always ensured.